For centuries, humanity had been seen as insignificant by the dominant civilizations of the galaxy. The aliens of the vast universe looked down upon Earth, dismissing it as a backwater planet, far behind in technological progress. Earth was a simple world, stuck in a cycle of war, poverty, and uncertainty. To the advanced species that ruled the stars, Earth was nothing more than a curiosity, a relic of a young and naive race that had barely begun to understand the cosmos. They saw humans as primitive, locked in their small corner of the universe, unable to reach beyond their planet. The galaxy had grown accustomed to this idea, that humanity was destined to remain forever within the confines of their blue and green world. The notion of humans ever becoming a threat or challenge was laughable. Among the galaxy's most powerful races, there was no fear of Earth. The Xartians, with their towering ships that seemed to pierce the very fabric of space, regarded humans as children who had yet to leave the playground. The Trellians, a race of perfect strategists, saw no value in Earth's chaotic history, and the Wyvera, whose vast empire stretched across hundreds of star systems, believed that humans were destined to fade into irrelevance. They had all watched Earth from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, but they had never once felt the need to take it seriously. On Earth itself, things were different. The truth was that humanity had been quietly progressing at a pace that none of the galactic powers had even considered. While the rest of the universe believed Earth's technology was still in the early stages of development, secret programs were in motion, spearheaded by a group of brilliant human minds. These individuals, driven by a deep belief in human potential, had seen the truth that Earth was capable of far more than anyone could imagine. They had been working in the shadows for decades, crafting plans that would change the course of history forever. But none of the alien civilizations, knew this. They had no idea that humanity was on the verge of something extraordinary. In hidden laboratories and underground bunkers, Earth's brightest engineers and military leaders had been quietly developing technologies that rivaled anything the galaxy had seen. They had developed faster than light travel, perfected energy shields, and designed weapons capable of shaking the very foundation of the universe. Earth was not just building ships, they were preparing for an awakening. For years, they had been preparing to prove to the galaxy that humanity was far from helpless. But no one in the galaxy had noticed the quiet buildup. Earth had been allowed to remain in its corner, unnoticed, just another forgotten world in a universe filled with countless stars. Yet in the hearts of those who believed, there was a quiet confidence. They knew the time for their plan to unfold had arrived. The world was still divided, still fighting over resources and ideals. Governments argued over trivial matters, and humanity's struggles seemed endless. But under the surface, something far greater was happening. Every major power on Earth had secretly invested in the project, knowing that the time would come when their combined strength would be necessary. Scientists had cracked the code of space travel, while engineers had crafted the most advanced fleet the universe would ever see. A fleet of 1,000 ships, each a marvel of human innovation, was taking shape. These ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were not merely vessels of war, they were symbols of the potential of the human race. And yet, no one outside Earth knew anything about them. As the years passed, the alien empires continued to dismiss humanity's capabilities. They had their own problems to deal with, their own wars and intrigues, and Earth was far from their minds. Why should they worry about a planet full of squabbling, primitive beings? They were too focused on their own affairs, how to maintain their dominance, how to control the galaxy's vast resources. The Trellians had their eyes set on the Wyvera's territory. The Xartians were battling the Vroth, and the Wyvera were locked in their own internal struggles. Earth's name was seldom mentioned in these matters, and if it was only to remark on how irrelevant the planet had become in the grand scheme of things. But there were whispers, rumors, and they began to stir in the far reaches of the galaxy. A few had begun to wonder why Earth, despite its primitive nature, was able to survive so many crises. Despite the constant conflicts and challenges, humanity had managed to rise from the ashes time and time again. There was something about them that defied the odds. It was this spirit, this resilience, that kept Earth alive. But even these whispers were nothing more than passing thoughts, unimportant to the galactic powers. They had seen it all before, races that rose and fell, and they expected humanity to do the same. It was just a matter of time before Earth was forgotten again, as so many other races had been. Meanwhile, on Earth, the leaders of this secret project were growing more confident. They knew that the galaxy would soon be in for a shock. The ships were almost ready. The last pieces of technology were falling into place, and Earth's fleet was preparing to make its first journey into the stars. The preparations were flawless. No alien race had any inkling of what was about to happen. The fleet would launch, and when it did, everything would change. But the leaders knew that once they revealed their hand, there would be no turning back. They could not hide their power once the fleet was unleashed. The galaxy would notice. The alien races that had laughed at humanity would be forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew. The truth was that Earth was no longer just a planet in a distant corner of the universe. Earth had become something much more, a new force, one that would soon take its place in the galactic order. The time for human insignificance was over. Yet even as the fleet's launch day drew nearer, there were still those on Earth who remained uncertain. Some feared the repercussions of revealing their power, knowing the risks involved. Could humanity truly stand against the might of the galaxy's empires? Others were excited, eager to prove that humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. But one thing was certain. Earth was about to make its mark in a way that no one could have predicted. The galaxy had believed humanity was stuck. They had been wrong. As the galaxy continued to turn, unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing on Earth, the leaders of this covert mission worked tirelessly to prepare for the day that would change everything. Earth's fleet, a marvel of human engineering, was growing at a rapid pace. The ships were not just vessels of war. They were the product of years of meticulous planning, research, and innovation. But no one outside Earth knew anything about it. For the alien civilizations that watched the Earth from afar, the sudden appearance of such a fleet would be unimaginable. They believed that humans were too primitive, too disorganized, to ever pull off something so grand. And yet, in secret, humanity was not only meeting but surpassing the expectations of its own leaders. It all began in the most unlikely of places, the hidden laboratories beneath the surface of Earth's cities. These were not places that civilians ever saw, not locations that were ever marked on a map. They were buried deep within the planet's crust, hidden away from prying eyes, shielded by the most advanced technology Earth had ever created. Here, scientists, engineers, and military experts worked together in silence. They didn't have the luxury of time or resources, but they had one thing that no alien race could ever take away: determination. Each day, progress was made in ways that no one thought possible. Ships were built, weapons were tested, and technology that could bend the very laws of physics was designed. The knowledge humanity had gained through decades of trial and error had led them to this moment, when everything they had worked for would be tested. The fleet was not just a collection of ships. It was a symbol of humanity's ability to adapt and overcome. These ships were built to do what no alien vessel had ever been asked to do: travel across the galaxy, face unimaginable dangers, and survive against overwhelming odds. They were designed to be self-sustaining, capable of surviving the harshest environments without the need for constant supplies. Each ship was equipped with advanced AI that would allow it to make decisions on its own, adapting to changing conditions in ways that no human commander could ever achieve. The technology was far ahead of anything the galaxy had ever seen, and yet it was being built in secrecy, far from the watchful eyes of alien surveillance. But the greatest challenge for humanity was not in the ships themselves. It was in the people who would pilot them. Human soldiers, engineers, and leaders were being trained for something far beyond what any of them had ever dreamed. These were not just ordinary men and women. They were the future of humanity, chosen for their skills, their strength, and their unwavering resolve. They were not just preparing for a war. They were preparing to reshape the future of the entire galaxy. Each individual was trained in the most advanced combat techniques, taught how to operate the new technologies that would power the fleet, and conditioned to think in ways that would give them the edge in battle. The human mind, though often underestimated by the galaxy's powers, was more than capable of adapting to the demands placed upon it. The preparation was grueling, and the stakes were higher than any of them had ever imagined. But there was no turning back. The fleet would soon be ready, and when it was, it would show the galaxy just how wrong they had been about humanity. One of the most closely guarded secrets of this project was the energy source that powered the fleet. For years, Earth scientists had worked on unlocking the secrets of quantum energy, an energy source so powerful that it could fuel the entire fleet for centuries without refueling. This technology had been developed in secret, away from the eyes of the alien powers that watched Earth. The power it provided was unimaginable. It was clean, limitless, and could be harnessed in ways that no other energy source could. But even as the energy source was perfected, the human leadership knew that they had to remain vigilant. If the alien empires discovered this technology before the fleet was ready, they would stop at nothing to seize it for themselves. The entire project could be lost before it had even begun. As the final preparations for the fleet's launch began, the human leaders faced a growing sense of unease. They knew that once the fleet was in the air, there would be no going back. The galaxy would have no choice but to respond, and humanity's first contact with the galactic powers would be a dangerous one. The Trellians, the Wyvera, the Xartians, all of them had their eyes on Earth, and they would not take kindly to a sudden rise in power from a planet they had long dismissed. Earth's leadership understood that they were walking a fine line. The moment they revealed their strength, the galaxy would either acknowledge their existence or crush them before they could become a real threat. There were disagreements among the human leaders. Some argued that Earth should remain hidden, that they should wait until they were fully prepared, until the fleet was stronger, until they had built more alliances with the alien races who might support them. Others disagreed, arguing that humanity had already waited too long. The galaxy would never respect Earth until humanity proved that they were capable of standing on their own, without relying on anyone else. If they waited too long, they risked losing the element of surprise, and the galaxy's powers would have time to prepare for humanity's emergence. They could not afford to wait. The fleet was ready, the ships were equipped, and the time for action was now. Even as these debates raged on Earth, the galaxy continued to turn, unaware of the coming storm. The alien civilizations were too absorbed in their own affairs to notice the subtle changes taking place on Earth. They continued to believe that humans were weak, that Earth was a primitive world, and that humanity had no place in the galaxy's future. They believed it so strongly that they never bothered to look closer, never thought to question their assumptions. They believed that the status quo would remain forever, that they were safe, that Earth was too far behind to ever become a real threat. But humanity was about to show them how wrong they were. As the last pieces of the fleet were completed, the final training exercises were held, and the energy source was integrated into each ship. The reality of what was about to unfold began to set in. The fleet was ready. The ships were fueled. The commanders were in place. The time for humanity's emergence had come. In the deepest chambers of Earth's secret operations, leaders gathered one final time to review their plans. The tension in the room was palpable. Each one of them knew the stakes. If this failed, humanity would be crushed under the weight of galactic power. But if they succeeded, Earth would be reborn as a force that no one could ignore. The countdown had begun. The world didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. The fleet was ready. The time to show the galaxy that humanity was no longer a mere speck in the corner of the universe had arrived, and with it the hidden preparations would be revealed in a way that no one could have predicted. The moment had come. Earth's fleet, 1,000 ships of unimaginable power and precision, was ready to take to the stars. For years, humanity had worked in secrecy, building the technology, the weapons, and the will to become something greater. But as the countdown to launch began, the tension was unbearable. In the darkened command centers hidden beneath Earth's surface, the final preparations were being made. Every officer, every engineer, every soldier involved in the operation knew what was at stake. If this mission failed, humanity's dream of becoming a respected power in the galaxy would be shattered. But if they succeeded, they would forever change the course of galactic history. The galaxy had underestimated them for far too long, and now they were ready to prove that Earth was no longer just a distant, irrelevant planet. The fleet, though silent on the outside, hummed with energy as the final systems were brought online. The ships, each one a marvel of human ingenuity, stood poised on their launch pads, ready to break free of the atmosphere. Each vessel was equipped with the most advanced technology the galaxy had ever seen. Faster-than-light engines, energy shields that could withstand the fiercest attacks, and weapons powerful enough to shatter entire fleets. Yet despite all this, the most powerful weapon humanity possessed wasn't the technology, it was the will to survive. For centuries, the galaxy had believed that humans were weak, disorganized, and incapable of standing up to the mighty alien races that rule the stars. But now, they were about to see that the true strength of humanity lay in its unyielding spirit, its drive to overcome the impossible, and its ability to fight against all odds. As the countdown to launch continued, the leaders on Earth watched in silence. Their hearts beat in unison, knowing that this moment would either make or break everything they had worked for. There was no turning back. The ships were ready, and so were the soldiers who would command them. They were more than just pilots. They were the vanguard of a new era, the first to step out into the unknown and show the galaxy that humanity was no longer a mere observer in the grand scheme of the universe. They were about to take the fight to the heart of the galaxy itself. The alien races that had once dismissed Earth as nothing more than a speck in the cosmos would soon learn just how wrong they were. The final seconds of the countdown echoed throughout the command centers, the tension rising with each passing moment. And then, with a single unified command, the fleet launched. The ships tore through the atmosphere with breathtaking speed, their engines roaring as they broke free of Earth's gravity. As the last of the ships vanished into the sky, a sense of awe swept over the commanders and engineers who had witnessed this moment. For them, this was not just a launch, it was the beginning of a new chapter in humanity's story. The galaxy would never be the same again. But even as the fleet soared into space, there was no celebration, no cheering. The true challenge was just beginning. The ships were designed for battle, yes, but they were also built for exploration. As the fleet ascended into the vast unknown, its commanders knew they had to proceed with caution. They couldn't just charge in blindly, even though the temptation to prove their strength was overwhelming. The galaxy, with its ancient empires and powerful factions, would not take kindly to a sudden surge of human power. But the humans in command were not afraid. They had come this far, and they knew that they were capable of achieving the impossible. The fleet had only one mission now: to awaken the galaxy to the truth. Humanity was no longer helpless. It was a force to be reckoned with. As the fleet traveled deeper into the stars, they encountered their first obstacles. At the edge of Earth's solar system, the ships came across a small fleet of Vroth ships, a race known for its ruthless tactics and vast territory. The Vroth had been observing Earth for some time, though. They hadn't yet considered the planet to be a threat. Now they were about to learn that Earth was not as helpless as they had assumed. The Vroth ships immediately moved to intercept, their weapons charging as they prepared to attack. But the humans were ready. In a calculated move, the first ship in the fleet unleashed its advanced weapons, striking the Vroth vessels with precision. The power of the weapons sent shockwaves through the Vroth fleet, forcing them to retreat in panic. The humans had made their first move, and the galaxy was watching. The news of this unexpected victory spread quickly across the galaxy. Alien empires, which had once scoffed at humanity's chances of survival, began to take notice. They watched with growing concern as humanity's fleet, still relatively small compared to the great galactic powers, made its way through space. The galaxy's leaders, who had long considered Earth a non-factor, suddenly found themselves questioning everything they had assumed about the human race. The Vroth, once feared for their strength, had been driven back by a single human fleet. What other surprises were hidden beneath the surface of this seemingly insignificant planet? Yet, even as Earth's fleet continued its journey, there were those within the fleet who began to feel the weight of the responsibility they now carried. The pressure to succeed was immense. Every move they made was being watched by the most powerful empires in the galaxy. One wrong decision, one misstep, could lead to disaster. But the humans were determined to press on. They knew the stakes. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that Earth was no longer a victim of the galaxy's indifference. It was about showing the universe that humanity had a place among the stars. The fleet continued its journey, moving ever farther into the unknown. Along the way, they encountered more challenges: hostile alien ships, dangerous asteroids, and the harsh conditions of deep space. But with each obstacle, the humans grew more confident, more determined. They had faced adversity before, and they had always emerged stronger. Now they were doing the same in the vast reaches of space. The fleet's commanders, once unsure of their place in the galaxy, now saw themselves as the vanguard of a new age. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for humanity's future. Back on Earth, the leaders watched the fleet's progress with a mixture of hope and apprehension. The galaxy had been awakened, but the real test was still to come. There would be no going back. Earth's fleet had made its mark, but the true battle for humanity's place in the galaxy was only just beginning. Would they be able to secure their future among the stars, or would they be crushed under the weight of the galaxy's power? Only time would tell, but one thing was certain: the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The awakening had begun, and the galaxy would soon learn that humanity was not to be underestimated. The galaxy had always moved at its own pace, a vast and seemingly unchanging expanse, where power, politics, and military might were the currency of the elite. For centuries, the great empires had ruled without fear of any external threat, believing themselves invincible. Then, humanity had emerged, quietly at first, and now with force. What had begun as a mere whisper within the galaxy's distant edges had now become a roar. The fleet of Earth, 1,000 ships strong, had struck its first blow, leaving the Vroth fleet reeling. This act of aggression, though swift and contained, had sent shockwaves through every corner of the galaxy. The alien powers, who had long looked down on Earth as a backward and insignificant world, could no longer ignore what was happening. The time of humanity's quiet existence was over, and the time of reckoning had begun. Back in the grand halls of the Galactic Council, the leaders of the galaxy's most powerful empires were in disarray. The news of Earth's fleet, capable of defeating a major race like the Vroth with just one strike, was spreading like wildfire. For the first time, the galaxy's ruling powers were facing a threat they had not anticipated. A species they had written off as weak, unworthy of attention. But now, Earth was not just a concern. It was a challenge, a puzzle that needed to be solved before it became an uncontrollable force. The Wyvera, the Trellians, the Xartians, these were the races that ruled the galaxy, and they had always thought themselves untouchable. But Earth had thrown that assumption into question, and they couldn't afford to ignore it any longer. The Galactic Council convened urgently, a rare event that signified the seriousness of the situation. On one side, the Trellian ambassador, a towering figure with dark, reptilian scales, demanded immediate action. "We cannot let this pass. If Earth is allowed to grow stronger, they will threaten the very fabric of our empire," the ambassador said, his voice cold and sharp. The Trellians were known for their aggressive military strategies, and their patience had run thin. They had already begun to prepare their own forces for an intervention. The fleet that had once thought Earth inconsequential was now in full motion, heading toward the edge of their space. They would not allow this human uprising to continue. On the other side of the room, the Xartian representative, a creature with multiple limbs and an ever-shifting face, remained calmer. "We must be cautious," the Xartian leader cautioned. "If we strike too quickly, we risk provoking an alliance of humans and drawing more races into their conflict. The galaxy has lived in peace for millennia. A war over a primitive species is not worth the cost." The Xartians were a diplomatic and strategic race, often preferring to use intelligence over force. But even they knew that Earth's emergence couldn't be dismissed entirely. Meanwhile, the Oivra, an ancient race known for their psychic abilities and cold, calculating nature, remained silent, observing the debate with a distant, almost detached air. They were masters of manipulation, able to predict the course of events with unnerving precision. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the Oivra leader spoke in a voice that seemed to echo with authority. "The human race may not be a threat in the traditional sense, but there is something unique about them. Their resilience, their adaptability. They are unlike anything we've encountered before. We would be wise not to underestimate them." The Oivra's cryptic words hung in the air, and the council room fell into an uncomfortable silence. They knew what the Oivra meant. The humans had something that no other race could match, an unbreakable will to survive. And that, more than any weapon or technology, was what made them dangerous. The debate continued for hours, with no clear consensus. The Galactic Council's decision to confront Earth was inevitable, but how to approach it was still unclear. Some suggested diplomacy, others advocated for a full military response. Some believed that Earth's newfound strength could be turned to their advantage, while others feared it could spark a chain reaction that would ignite a galaxy-wide war. The stakes had never been higher. The galaxy had been thrown into disarray by a single act of human defiance, and no one knew how it would all unfold. As the Council deliberated, Earth's fleet moved further into space, undeterred by the shifting tides of galactic politics. Commander Ilara Morgan, the leader of Earth's fleet, watched from the bridge of the flagship as the stars stretched out before them, endless and inviting. The human fleet was only just beginning to show its strength. There was still so much to do, so much to prove. Ilara knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. There would be no mercy from the galactic powers. But she was determined to succeed. Humanity had waited long enough to make its mark on the galaxy, and now it was time to take that step. The first response came quickly. A massive fleet of Trellian ships, their dark forms looming in space, approached Earth's fleet with the unmistakable intent to destroy. The Trellians had no patience for what they saw as a threat. They were the first to act, believing that a swift and decisive strike would send a clear message to the rest of the galaxy. The Trellians were powerful, their ships equipped with devastating weapons and advanced shields. But the humans were ready. Commander Morgan had anticipated this move, and her fleet was prepared for battle. In a coordinated strike, Earth's ships deployed their advanced weapons, sending a barrage of firepower into the Trellian fleet. The battle was fierce, the void of space illuminated by explosions and energy blasts. But Earth's ships were faster, more agile, and their weaponry was unlike anything the Trellians had encountered before. The Trellians were forced to retreat, but not without suffering heavy losses. The victory was sweet, but Commander Morgan knew it was just the beginning. The Trellians were not the only power in the galaxy. There would be others, and they would come with even greater force. But for the first time, humanity had proven that it could stand its ground. Earth was no longer just a small, insignificant planet. It was a force to be reckoned with. The news of the Trellian defeat spread like wildfire throughout the galaxy. The Oivra, the Xartians, and all the other empires began to take action. Earth's fleet had made its mark, and now the galaxy would respond. The question was no longer whether Earth would survive, but whether the galaxy could withstand the storm that was about to unfold. For humanity, There was no turning back. The fleet was unstoppable, and the galaxy would soon learn that Earth was no longer a quiet, forgotten world. It was a new power, and it would not be easily dismissed. The real war had just begun, and Earth's enemies would have to decide whether they were ready for the fight. As Commander Morgan watched her fleet advance further into uncharted space, she knew one thing for certain: humanity was here to stay. The galaxy had been put on notice, and there was no going back. The galaxy had always been a vast place, its rulers comfortable in their own power, their empires stretching across countless star systems, each one seemingly untouchable. For centuries, the great races had lived in relative peace, with nothing truly threatening their dominance. But all that changed when humanity unleashed its might upon the stars. The galaxy's old powers, which had once dismissed Earth as a primitive, isolated planet, were now left in shock. No one had expected humanity to rise so quickly, to wield such strength, and now the entire galaxy was on the edge of a new era, one where Earth was no longer just a speck in the cosmic void, but a force to be reckoned with. Commander Elara Morgan stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, staring out at the vast, endless stars that stretched out before her. The quiet hum of the ship's systems surrounded her as her mind raced, processing the enormity of what was unfolding. The battle with the Trellians had been a turning point, a moment when humanity had shown the galaxy that it was no longer a backwater world, but a power capable of striking fear into the hearts of the galaxy's greatest empires. But that victory was only the beginning. The Trellians had retreated, but they would be back, and the other galactic powers would follow. Humanity had drawn first blood, but the real test was still ahead. The news of Earth's fleet, 1,000 ships strong, had spread like wildfire through the galaxy, and it was only a matter of time before the other empires took action. The Dwyvra, the Xartians, and even the Vroth, who had once been humiliated by the humans, were now preparing for a full-scale war. But there was something different about Earth's approach. Unlike the other races, who fought with cold, calculating precision, humans fought with an unpredictable intensity. They fought for survival, for their very existence, and that gave them an edge that no one could have anticipated. The galaxy's greatest minds were scrambling to understand this new force, but none could come close to truly grasping what humanity was capable of. Back on Earth, the leaders of the planet had gathered in secret, their faces grim as they watched the reports coming in from the front lines. They had known that war was inevitable, but the scale of what was happening was beyond their wildest expectations. The Council of Earth was now in a state of constant crisis management, making difficult decisions that would shape the future of their species. But despite the overwhelming challenges they faced, there was an undeniable sense of unity and purpose. The Earth they had once known was gone, replaced by a new reality where humanity's destiny was now intertwined with the stars. No longer would they cower in the shadows of the galaxy's ancient powers. They had taken their first steps into the universe, and they were not turning back. The next move was crucial. Earth's fleet, having already repelled the Trellians, now set its sights on securing its place in the galaxy. Commander Morgan and her crew knew that the next battle would be a defining one. The galaxy was filled with unknown threats, and while humanity had proven its strength, they had only scratched the surface of what lay ahead. The coming days would be filled with uncertainty, but Elara had a singular focus. It was not just about survival. It was about taking control of humanity's future. They were no longer just defending their home. They were claiming their rightful place among the stars. As Earth's fleet continued its march through the galaxy, it became clear that the other empires had no choice but to respond. The Dwyvra, known for their psychic abilities and manipulative nature, began to gather their forces, sensing that humanity's unpredictability was something they could not control. The Xartians, a race of highly intelligent strategists, began to study Earth's military tactics, eager to find a way to outmaneuver them. But what they didn't understand was that humanity's greatest strength was its resilience, the unyielding will to fight, to survive. and to adapt, using their creativity and resourcefulness to outsmart even the most advanced races. It wasn't long before the galaxy's response came. A massive fleet, assembled by the Wyvera, arrived at the outskirts of Earth's territory. Their ships, sleek and deadly, outnumbered the human fleet, but that didn't deter Ilara. She had faced impossible odds before, and she was ready to face them again. The battle was fierce, with explosions lighting up the void of space as both sides clashed in a deadly dance. The Wyvera's psychic powers allowed them to anticipate Earth's moves, but they underestimated the unpredictability of humanity's tactics. Time and again, Ilara's fleet outflanked their enemies, using every trick in the book to gain the upper hand. The battle raged on for days, with neither side willing to back down. But in the end, it was humanity's determination that won out. The Wyvera, though powerful, had never encountered a force like Earth before. They were used to dominating weaker species, but this was different. Humanity's drive to survive, to push forward even when all seemed lost, was something the Wyvera could not predict. They had underestimated the human spirit, and in doing so, they had sealed their defeat. The news of the Wyvera's retreat spread quickly through the galaxy, sending shockwaves through every empire. The galaxy had been irrevocably changed. Humanity had not only survived, they had emerged victorious. The balance of power had shifted, and the old empires were forced to reckon with the fact that they were no longer the undisputed rulers of the galaxy. Earth had carved out its place among the stars, and no one could deny it. Commander Morgan watched as her fleet regrouped after the battle, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had just accomplished. The war was far from over, and there would be more battles to fight. But one thing was certain: humanity had entered a new era. No longer would they be the silent, forgotten species at the edge of the galaxy. They were now a force to be reckoned with, and their enemies would have to take notice. As the stars stretched out before her, Ilara knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had been forever changed, and humanity was ready to claim its place in the cosmos. A new era had begun, and it was humanity's time to shine.